Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies. This week I'm looking at country life in the UK, which is by request of Chris Morales, that one Bond guy. Last week I did a whole series of listener questions and answers, and one of the topics that I didn't quite have time to go into as deep as I'd like was this topic, country life. There are a few, but I actually had to shorten the last episode by quite a bit just to get it to the 30-minute mark that I like it to be. But I thought, country life in the UK is something I know a fair bit about, as I've travelled around the world, especially, say, in China. When people have said they're thinking of travelling to the UK, what they normally mean is they're travelling to London. As a person kind of born and largely brought up in the UK, I've actually spent very little time in London itself. In fact, pretty much the last year that I've started getting to know London in any way at all. Of course, I now live in Yorkshire, where I've lived before. I've lived in the West Midlands and East Anglia. These are very, very rural places, at least where I've lived. So I feel this is one topic on which I'm quite happy to talk about. Of course, if you're travelling to any unfamiliar country, the countryside isn't necessarily the first place you're thinking of going to. So I hope this episode gives some insight into country life in the UK, and I'll start off with the place where I'm recording. I am recording in Bingley in West Yorkshire. Now it's a pretty small town, maybe a village not so long ago. It was mentioned in the Domesday Book very briefly, so that's 1086, in which the new Norman conquerors are kind of going around the country just totalling up how many pigs, how many sheep, how many chickens and all that, and trying to get an idea of what is this land that they've conquered and what is this land that they're parcelling out. So it was briefly mentioned there. That really starts the written history of Bingley as far as my quick search has found out. I've talked about this place, for example, on my Instagram. You might have seen my videos with the Christmas lights. A small town, little village, where they have the Star Wars Society switch on the Christmas lights. Definitely a place made for me.
So in 10 seconds we'll start the countdown, okay? For the Bingley Christmas light switch on of 2023, before Father Christmas arrives and brings us, if we can give boys and girls, lots of presents. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I live at the bottom of the valley, which is Bingley. Up the hill is Eldwick. Just a short walk, really. And on the 5th of November, they made a night to remember, as we had our bonfire night, which I've also talked about, I guess, on my Instagram, I think on my podcast, and on the YouTube. So I've given a bit of an idea about the cycle of village life here before, and it is a market town. It was given its official charter in the year 1212, a market charter given by King John. Yes, the famous bad King John from the Robin Hood legend, or, if you're into medieval history, the Magna Carta. He's the one who signed the great treaty at Runnymede, which gave us basic rights and the idea the king should follow the law. Allegedly, the dog breed, the Airedale Terrier, was born and bred in this area and is apparently sometimes known as the Bingley Terrier, but I'm not so sure about that. When I first moved here, a local friend did point out that one of the UK's most notorious serial killers, the Yorkshire Ripper, was born and brought up here. He operated in the late 70s, the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. That gruesome bit of history is, I'm afraid, the point that gives us our best-known person from Bingley. But perhaps the best-known thing, I guess there's Mr. Bingley in Pride and Prejudice, but perhaps the best-known thing is actually the Bradford and Bingley Building Society. So if I talk to people in the UK who are not from Yorkshire, generally they won't know where Bingley is. They might not have much of an idea of the place. One friend did get a bit confused and kind of thought I was talking about the bank, because the Bradford and Bingley Building Society, a society where it's a bank owned by their members as mutuals rather than by external shareholders, the Building Society was kind of created here, it had its headquarters here until relatively recently, and was a major local employer, and I would say is nationally famous. I lived in Bradford, and I thought, oh, as in Bradford and Bingley, it's a place. In fact, lots of the places around here, created building societies, Halifax and so on. They're all these towns in West Yorkshire that are kind of famous for them as a result of the financial institutions that arose there. So I had a look up at Bradford and Bingley. It was a building society. It reformed, as many did, in the year 2000. It demutualised, so it went from being a building society to just being a bank with shareholders. And then in 2008 it suffered from the credit crunch, as many have, partly nationalised and split apart and so on. It was once a great institution. I would say this is probably Bingley's claim to fame, the Bradford and Bingley Building Society. And that market I mentioned, there is a marketplace that was given its charter in the year 1212. It is still a very regular marketplace, and it was a market just the other day that I was taking a video of and sharing as we had a Wookiee dancing in the snow, lighting the Christmas lights. Bingley is not the most famous village in the UK. I would say, without doubt, the most famous village in the UK is the village of Ambridge. Ambridge does not exist. It is a fictitious location of the world's oldest running soap opera, The Archers, currently with about 5 million regular listeners. It's been broadcast since 1951. Episodes are broadcast on BBC Radio 4. It is an audio drama every day, Sunday to Friday at 7 p.m, then they're repeated the next day at 2 p.m, except on Saturdays. The episodes are about 12 to 13 minutes. You can listen on the app BBC Sounds for free. Of course, if you want to catch a whole week's worth in one go, there's the omnibus edition on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. It's aired over 20,000 episodes and is the world's longest running present-day drama by number of episodes. It's also the oldest soap opera in the world. So for those who are unfamiliar with it, and it is a bit of a national institution, Stephen Fry, a notable fan, gave an introduction to it for people who have never ever listened. He said, first of all, what exactly is The Archers? Well, it's a radio soap opera set in the fictional English village of Ambridge. It aims to provide essential drama from the heart of a country. So, what does that mean you'll be hearing? Ambridge is a 21st century village with all the pressures of modern rural life. You'll become involved in the characters' personal and business struggles, their love affairs, and all sorts of village activities, from saving the local shop to the annual fete. There are plenty of lighter moments too. These characters then, several of the main families are farmers. At the heart of the programme are David and Ruth Archer at Brookfield Farm. David once had cause to regret employing a handsome cowman, but they're pretty stable nowadays. Their cousins, Pat and Tony Archer, farm organically at Bridge Farm. That's a dairy farm as well, but they also keep pigs and grow vegetables. They sell their own yoghurt, ice cream and cheese. At the opposite end of the farming scale are well-off Brian and Jennifer Aldridge at Home Farm, which is the biggest in the village. That little boy who lives there is Brian's son from a torrid affair. When his mistress died, the amazing Jennifer kindly took the child in. The Archers family is related to the Aldridges and to several other Ambridge families, including the Hebden Lloyds. She runs a riding school and he's a vet. If all that sounds a bit posh, there are lots of less well-off characters too. Most of them live and work in and around Ambridge, on the farms, in the local pub, the Bull, at the village shop, Grey Gables Hotel, or St Stephen's Church. Those sons of the soil, the Grundys, are particularly good value, both for the scrapes they get in and the fact that Emma Grundy isn't Ed's wife, as you might think, but the ex-wife of Ed's brother Will. Plenty going on in the village of Ambridge. And I say it is a fictitious place, but is there a real life Ambridge? It's set in the fictional county of Worcestershire in the Midlands. but may possibly have been based on Cutnall Green in Worcestershire. So I lived in West Worcestershire. This place, Cutnall Green, wasn't far away. I have been there as a child, and I went to the pub called the Checkers, which is thought to represent the equivalent of the Bull in the Archers, where Ambridge locals head for a drink. There are cricket teams and acres of farmland and other key features of the Archers. Most importantly, even the accent, which is the home accent of the soap opera, is pretty much the same as the actors of the show. I say pretty much the same because to help differentiate on a radio show, they do have a variety of actors with different accents, and it has been a bit of a joke that sometimes when they cast a new character, the first question is, what accent in the UK have we not done, and how can we justify this person from a different part of the UK moving to this little village in the West Midlands? Anyway, the BBC has kept the location of any previous recording a secret. It's sometimes hinted at to being near Birmingham and is thought to be inspired by various villages in Worcestershire where the creator of the Archers, Godfrey Basely, came from. So I would suggest it is Cutnall Green. There's several key features. They're very, very similar. It has inspired quite the fandom, and there is indeed a www.academicarchers.net, a community of BBC Radio 4's The Archers fans with an academic interest in the show. They've been having conferences since 2016. They've got a Facebook group with 1,200 plus members. They've had over 250 people attend their Academic Archers conference, and over 60 conference presenters, and of course books, where I must declare my interest because these books are published by Emerald Publishing, which is the company I now work for, and as a result I have some of their test copies which I am thoroughly testing. Although the key books are actually put out by BBC Books, so I have here the Archers Chronicles, and as it has inspired such a literature, I've got 4 of the books on me that I do go through in my free time. I'm not researching this podcast. So as I've got 4 of them, I thought I'd start off with the Ambridge Chronicles, Moments That Made the Nation's Favourite Radio Drama. It's an overview, and actually a very good overview, from BBC Books, which I got for a whole £2 at a local charity shop. Partway through, I particularly like this chapter on village life. It says, urban dwellers view village life with envy, believing there to be crime-free streets, cheery residents, apple-cheeked children with smiles on their faces and songs in their hearts. Such universal conviviality is rarely found. Villagers, like city folk, find their lives marked by crime, crisis, calamities, as well as a host of niggles and quirks. In Ambridge, neighbours, who are good friends, fall out with alarming regularity over issues great and small. Sometimes neighbours turn out to be arch-villains who must be brought to book by judge and jury. Conspiracies of misfortune and bad timing bring others to the dock. However, it tends to be more low-key events that evoke the strongest feelings. Take the flower and produce show, for example. A tremendous will to win, the prize being a rosette or similar, drives some competitors to extraordinary lengths. The prize, vegetables and baking are inevitably the most hard-fought categories. Indeed, food remains at the heart of village life, varying from gastronomic delicacy to home-cooked delight. There are badly kept secrets in a village and well-masked wisdom that will out on rare occasions. In Ambridge, life is sufficiently green and pleasant to attract celebrities who cause more ripples of excitement than a stone thrown in the village pond. Everybody needs good neighbours. I do like that one. And this book also notes, has there ever been a good egg in Ambridge called Simon? And lists the various villains in Ambridge called Simon, to the point it's become a bit of a running joke, or an in-joke. I do like that book as an overview of the events going on, because these characters and their intertwined lives do have quite the history, as in my experience in small villages tends to be the case. I'll turn to the academic ones, the ones where I must flag my interest, which is the company the company I work for publishes them. Fandom, Culture and the Archers, an everyday story of academic folk. A little play on words, since of course the Archers is the everyday story of farming folk. They're edited by this lady called Cara Courage, which I think is a great name, and Nicola Headlam, also a good name, but Cara Courage sounds like a Marvel superhero. Anyway, turning to the academic take, I always think it's great if you can explain any academic topic through, Star Wars, Star Trek, James Bond, or almost anything else. So the Archers seems like a fair overlap. I think there's quite the overlap of academics and archers. One thing I thought was interesting for whatever fandom you're part of was their kind of hierarchy. An indicative continuum of the Archers fandom was the casual, active and transformative fans, these three different categories. So casual fans listen by overhearing, they might recognise some characters, and they might know some people, some storylines, but casual. I think that might explain my view towards some Disney. I don't think I've watched much Disney, but I've heard people talk about it. I probably recognise some characters, although I know they get them mixed up. I have to say, I struggle to create any view on their storylines. I'm sure I could muster some, though. Anyway, then there's active fans. Active fans are people who always listen, follow long-range storylines, and have lots of views on characters. I think for the Archers, I used to be here. I don't listen these days, especially living abroad broke the habit. But yeah, when I listen, I generally listen because it's only, 12, 13 minutes a day. It's a nice little filler. And yeah, long-range storylines. Things come up. I think there was the Beast of Ambridge storyline that went for years and years and years, in and out. Allegedly there was some wild boar that was terrorising the countryside, which many of the main characters did not believe, and might have kind of just turned out to be an escaped pig. But anyway, these storylines come and go over the course of years. As an active fan, I would have a view, but I wouldn't cross the street to tell you my views. Then there are transformative fans. Transformative fans participate in fan groups. They take, into hobbies and professions, and it becomes their almost professionalised hobby. I think this would well describe many in the James Bond community, and of course the Star Wars community definitely has transformative fans who might turn part of their house into almost a Star Wars museum. Ooh, there's something tempting. Anyway, I like their basic definition of fans here, and the Archers definitely has such a fandom that one of the chapters is called Cult or Culture. That the Archers has cult status is clear from the passion shown by its fandom, the proliferation of fan groups on Facebook, Twitter, the regular blogs and podcasts available. I'll just interject here and say that's right. This radio drama has radio drama spin-offs created by fans and radio commentary as well. Anyway, even references by many who might not count themselves as fans or even listeners. So, for example, over the years, Tony Hancock back in the 60s, he did his parody version of The Archers. The Wainwrights was a radio play based on what might happen if a resident of somewhere like Ambridge actually heard the broadcasts of their life as we hear. And Ned Sherrin produced a couple of sitcoms called The Cobblers of Umbridge, nicely riffing off Ambridge, and The Archers with its recurring The Archers accidentally sketches, those claim to portray the Archers the way it sounds to people who only listen to the show inadvertently. The BBC Radio 4 series, Dead Ringers, a satirical show, lots of impressions, has frequently parodied characters from the Archers, including a special edition on January the 1st, 2001, to celebrate the 50th anniversary. I really like this as it goes into not just the Archers, but also the spin-offs from Archers Professional, and it does get into fandom as well. So this is from the book Fandom, Culture and the Archers. It even has some lovely photographs, and this works well for a podcast where people will create an Ambridge cardigan, or they'll create a quilt. They'll engage in the handicrafts referred to in the radio drama. I mentioned there's a few books, there's a whole set, which I've been taking home, as I say, to thoroughly test, just part of my work in publishing. Don't call me a hero. There's one called Gender, Sex and Gossip in Ambridge, the women in the Archers, by the same editors. Of course, this is a serious one. Gendered tropes are not hard to find in The Archers. In his celebrated BBC Radio 4, John Finnemore's souvenir programme, the titular comedian creates a pastiche of Ambridgean gender characterisation that is recognisable even to the occasional listener of The Archers. The men, quote, always sound tired from their hard work of farming business. The, quote, insufferably wry women, end quote, are the incidental markers of coffee, speak to move the plot along, and are smugly tolerating of the menfolk. The form of The Archers presents a more or less equal number of male and female characters. There has been unease. The gender stereotyping on display is of an unhelpful kind. In her contribution to the Women of Ambridge panel of the 2018 Academic Archers Conference, Charlotte Martin, the actor for Susan Carter, aka Dr. Charlotte Connor, caused gasps from the auditorium by pointing out that there were no women writers of The Archers until 1975, coinciding with a period when the future of The Archers was far from certain as it made the transition from post-war farming propaganda towards contemporary drama in a rural setting. This is hard to imagine given the subsequent revered status of Vanessa Whitburn as the programme's long-running editor, often accused of simultaneous Brooksideation. Of Ambridge, she'd worked on the Channel 4 soap opera Brookside, and of shifting the focus to the lives of the women, hitherto just farmers' wives. In a career retrospective, Whitburn admitted that she arrived as an ambitious editor, ready to make her mark with a controversial first storyline, Elizabeth Archer's abortion. She was stung by the early pejorative portrayal of her as a domineering feminist editor with an eye only for the big story. It's not hard to find outrage and opprobrium for those who feel that gendered agendas abound in The Archers, but it can also do no right. On the one hand, it is perceived by some to be written by those of liberal metropolitan elite, admonished for being part of political correctness gone mad. On the other hand, however, it simultaneously lacks female role models, or feminist role models, and often pointedly career women conspicuous by their absence. Critics claim that Whitburn turned a gentle, snoozy countryside tale into a soap, the term loaded with class derision, abundant with crime, sex, drugs, abortion, homosexuality, biracial marriage and families, wayward teenagers, adultery, single motherhood, donated sperm and IVF, in short, everything of everyday life through time that, however, upsets some listeners' bucolic image of rural life. Well, all uncontroversial stuff from Cara Courage and Nicola Headlam. This is from their book, again, through the publisher that I worked for, so, as I say, it did come my way. That one was interesting. There's another one on flapjacks and feudalism that really goes into the class structures. Kind of touched on, actually, in the previous two, that class does form an important part of life in The Archers. But again, I'll just do one more, which is from their amazingly titled Custard, Culverts and Cake. I do like it. And again, just chapter 1, I love the headline, My parsnips are bigger than your parsnips. The negative aspects of competing at flower and produce shows. I'll just do a little bit of this one before I carry on, go on to The Archers. The Ambridge Flower and Produce Show is the source of frequent scandals. For example, the misunderstanding that resulted in Chutney Gate in 2016 caused feelings to run high. However, there is also evidence of deliberate cheating. Toy records 3 confirmed instances between 1975 and 2008, 2 planned and 1 opportunist, along with a number of unproven allegations. According to Michaels and Mythe, cheating is a general class of deviance that occurs in a variety of contexts, whilst Andrea, Carpenter, Shulman and Levine believe that it is now commonplace throughout society. Hauser, Vettner and Winter argue that the perception of being treated unfairly by another person significantly increases the individual's propensity to cheat. Taken at face value, Flower and Produce shows are charming, community-based events, showcasing personal endeavour for little in the way of reward. However, both the Ambridge experience and the literature suggest that the competitive nature of the event, aligned with the potential for perceived unfair treatment by the judges, may mean that the likelihood of cheating is high. Given this, how representative is the Ambridge Flower and Produce Show for a real-life flower and produce show? This chapter examines the emotions and behaviour that these shows engender by reviewing scholarly thinking of competition, competitive behaviour, and cheating, and then comparing critical incidents of the fictional Ambridge show with evidence derived from interviews with the committee and contestants of the annual flower and produce show in a small market town in Wiltshire. Not too far from Worcestershire, I think. At least not from where I'm sitting in Yorkshire. I do like that. And they've got a series of highlights throughout the article, which again I won't read out the whole thing, but I do think it's funny. Everyone's got a different point at which they think playing the system becomes cheating, so there's lots of grey areas. It doesn't say you can't use a packet, but you're not going to win, that's for sure, if they're growing onions in an unorthodox way. When my friend's jam didn't set, he put a label on it saying French set preserved to make it seem like it was meant to be like that, and he got placed. Oh, the unfairness, my unfairness. Or one lady whose entrance was a disappointment. My husband was nudging me, saying, "How embarrassing is that? Pretend it's not yours." So, I know the result of that chapter. Yes, The Archers is actually not so removed from reality. I have to say, I think it's a pretty good way to get an insight into British country life. And I realise I spent the majority of this podcast on The Archers without mentioning any of the key plot lines, but those you can find, because one of the best things about The Archers, I haven't listened for years and years, but I know that if I download an episode, I get straight back into it, because it's got that pick up, put down quality. It's very easy to get into. So if you were to come to the UK, could you find a real life Ambridge? Well, as I say, there is that village in the West Midlands on which it's supposedly based, Cutnall Green. I wouldn't say it's a huge tourist trap by any means, but it is very nice and it is representative of many other villages around the UK. Recently, I've been to Whitby, which is an East Yorkshire fishing town. It used to be a hugely important port, and of course it's got a special connection to Captain Cook. It's always worth mentioning to Australian listeners, so it does have a huge amount of tourism for that. It was also where Dracula landed in England, according to the Bram Stoker novel. So Whitby, it's a nice little town, borderline village, an easy place to get to, but with some beautiful countryside all around it. A place that I've referred to on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/British Culture, is Haworth. I've particularly shown the 1940s weekend there. It's the home to the Brontes, so again, attracts a bit of tourism, slightly better set up for tourists than many other places. Somewhere that I don't think I've shared about on my Instagram or YouTube or anywhere really is Northallerton in North Yorkshire. Northallerton is particularly lucky. It's on one of the main train lines that goes from London to Newcastle, so you can actually get from London up to Northallerton relatively easily, and I have to say I've never quite worked out why the train stops. London, Newcastle I get, but Northallerton is a very, very small place, and everyone I've talked to is equally baffled why it stops there. But it's great that it does, because if you're in London you can just shoot straight up Northallerton. Obviously there's a classic train hotel right next to the train station. Then as you walk down the high street, there's a few really good pubs, a hotel there, and a Betty's tea shop, which they pay me nothing to say this, but I just think they're great. And the Northallerton one is particularly nice, and all around there is very much the rural life that you'll have an insight into from The Archers, albeit with a very, very different accent. However, Northallerton is lovely. And as for anyway, outside England, because I've only referenced places in England so far, much of Wales, I think it's very hard to pick out a particular place, because of course I'm talking about the countryside, so places are necessarily small, but Wales has a rich network of bed and breakfasts that you can easily travel about, and of course no shortage of castles. And if I were to try and recommend a place in Scotland, I've been all around the edge of Scotland. I've taken a ship, as far rounded as you can. I would say that Edinburgh, even though obviously it's a great city, but Edinburgh is surrounded by very, very beautiful countryside, and so I'd say that's my surprising entry in the British countryside, Edinburgh, because, as I say, the area around it is a lot more rural than I imagined. Of course I went in summer, a fantastic day. I did get sunburn in Edinburgh, which I was very surprised at, but I still thoroughly enjoyed my trip there, and it stays in my mind of what a surprise. I go to a great city, I find great countryside. So, today I've talked about Bingley, Whitby, Haworth, Northallerton, Wales and Edinburgh, all very, very briefly, and I've gone quite deep into the archers and everyday tale of farming folk. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you to those who've been checking out my YouTube video talking about my top 10 suits, my top 10 English style suits. That was a lot more popular than I expected. That was a video by request. I would not have covered that topic if I hadn't received actually a couple of messages asking me to do it. So I did it. People have responded very kindly, very nicely. Thank you very much. And a few more people have signed up to my newsletter. Again, I've been sharing on my Instagram that I do send out little gifts, and I've been sending out Christmas cards and so on, podcast mug from time to time. I sent out a podcast mug to a gentleman in India who's at medical school, and one gentleman who was teaching English in Korea, and a friend of mine in America. So quite a few little gifts to people who subscribe to my podcast. I try and do it once a month. Try and remember. And it's just an insight into my day-to-day life. Oh, funnily enough, which gives an insight into life in Bingley. So if you've got more of an interest, then you can either click the link which is in the show notes, or message me on Fleming Never Dies on Instagram, or send me an email at albionneverdies@gmail.com. But however you do it, do keep in touch. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you to Chris Morales at That One Bond Guy on Instagram for suggesting this great topic. Thank you.